Yo, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Prison to Promise. I'm your host, Dr. Craig Waleed. Today's guest is the good brother, Dr. Joe Louis Hernandez. He's a father, a son, a friend, a man in recovery, and a powerful example of what transformation can look like when opportunity meets determination. You heard? Joe Lewis's journey has taken him through addiction, incarceration, recovery, education, and now the leadership as a director at a community college. He got clean at 21, returned to school at 28, and along the way found mentors, community, and purpose. People like Diana Felix and Oscar Flores helped him see what was possible. And today, Joe is helping others see that same possibility in themselves. That's real dope, yo. In this conversation, we talk about transformative ruptures, healing ruptures, the Rising Scholars Program, and the responsibility leaders have to reach back and lift others forward. Joe Lewis's story reminds us that no one is defined by their worst chapter, and that with education, support, and community, redemption is not only possible, it's powerful. Let's get into this conversation, y'all, here on the Prison to Promise podcast. Right, all right. Yo, man, thanks for meeting with me on this platform. It's really good to see you again.
It's good to see you too, man. Thank you so much for. I know we've been off and on trying to get me on, so I'm glad
Yeah,
I can make it work.
right on. And I know you have a very busy schedule, so I just want to say thanks for, taking the time to make this happen. So, out of respect for your time, man, let's just jump right in. And
All right.
yeah, here on the Prison to Promise podcast, man, I like to collect stories of people with lived experience who are living promising lives post incarceration with hopes of inspiring and informing other people, man, who are coming out of prisons and jails, who are also dealing with family members who are in prisons and jails. And hopefully policymakers might listen to some of these interviews and get some insights. And so once again, thanks, man. But just jumping right in, Joe Lewis, who is Joe Lewis Hernandez? Beyond, say, your degrees, your titles, and your professional work, like, who are you? And this is for people who don't know who you are.
So, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a friend, all my titles. I think I'm somebody in recovery, someone that has experienced incarceration, addiction, and really gone from, I want to say, nothing to something. Someone that continues to just look for a new way of life, and not just for myself, but like supporting others and bringing others along with myself, right? Primarily my family, but I also know that it's not just me in this world that experienced what I experienced. And so there's others that we have to put our hands out to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that, man. And you just said something real profound too, bro, because you said, I went from nothing to something. And I like to think that even though we might be doing stuff that really is of little value, I think we all are something, you
Yeah.
know? And I think you understand that as well. Um, But thinking about that movement, that transition from nothing to something, what were some of those early experiences that I guess helped you shape your path for better or for worse? What helped you get to where you are now?
I think, I often say, and people ask a question similar to that, like, hey, if you could, would you change anything that you experience? And I always say no. And I think because everything that I experience has provided me the the knowledge,
Mhm.
right? And a foundation, to be able to be where I'm at, and similar to that, right? Like when you come from nothing, you know how to be humble, how to, you know, be in a position that provides humility for others. Some people don't. Don't get me wrong. I know some people come here, get a little fame, start feeling themselves,
Yeah.
start thinking everybody got to feel them. But I think for me, all my experiences, like, and being in recovery tells me, man, that like I'm just one choice away from being back where I come from. And I think, so early on, being in addiction, being on the streets, I did most of the stuff that comes with being on the streets, living on the streets, here and there, dropping out of high school 3 times, and then I think, being incarcerated. The first time I was locked up was when I was 19, and then the second time I was locked up was when I was 20.
Mhm.
And then I got clean when I was 21. And I think that's also another, factor that has shaped. I got clean when I was 21 and I went to school thinking I wanted to be like a drug and alcohol counselor,
Yeah, yeah.
and then quickly convinced myself that's not what I wanted to do. So I dropped out of school at the community college level one more time and then just went to work, and had to work, like menial labor, but decent labor, right? Because work is good.
Right.
And so then for me coming back to school at 28, I think those were the experiences, right? And then encountering faculty and staff that cared because it's a difference, right? When you come to a community college or you go to a college, not that all teachers don't care,
Mhm.
but there's a difference here for some of the educators that are at this level and their level of care, and I think at the K-12 level is just some burnout that is experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. And you you said you returned to school at the age of 28, and that was the same age that I returned to school. And I think that at 28 I knew what I wanted. I knew where I was going or
Mhm.
what direction I was going. And that, or should I say, I knew what I did not want, to put it better. I still was trying to figure it out. And so for you, do you think there was like a particular moment or a particular event that occurred that made you realize your life needed to move in a different direction?
From when I was 28 or from when I got clean?
From say when you got clean, or at any point for that
I
matter.
think it's funny, right? Because I got clean when I was 21 and I didn't want to get clean. And sometimes I'll say this, right? I really got clean because I was on a joint suspension
Mhm.
and I had already got locked up once and I got saved from the joint suspension being striked and sent to prison, right?
Mhm.
And in my mind, I thought, how am I going to go to prison? And when they ask me why I'm here, it's because I got high.
Yeah.
So then my ego kicked in, right? And I started going to meetings and I started talking to people at meetings. And I think that was the first kind of like started meeting people,
Mhm.
right? And started feeling the care that people have.
Mhm.
You know, um, there's this line in the book from the fellowship that I read, that says we greet each others with the same. I'm gonna paraphrase it, but like it says we greet each other with the same warmth
Mhm.
of survivors of tragic,
Mhm.
right,
Mhm.
incidences, right? Which in essence we all know what we struggled with. We all know what we've been through. So when we arrive to these rooms, right, like these hugs, these love, this like embracement we get from each other, it feels like, we all survived something catastrophic.
Mhm.
And so we're here together. And I think that was the first kind of like break and meeting those people and kind of traveling that broke me from that cycle, to when my homies got out and then they were calling me to go back to the hood.
Yeah.
I had to end up saying no. Like, why am I gonna go back to the hood? Like, I'm clean. I got 6 months. I got, I'm pushing up on this. And then I think educationally, I always remember my first semester back in 2012 when I was 28. Excuse me. I had this English class, right? And I tested into the lowest of everything because when I started, there was remedial English, right? Remedial everything.
Right.
And so I was in this class and this professor asked us to write this experience that we had, you know, and she said, write 500 words on an experience that you could remember. And I remember after I wrote my experience sitting in class and people were talking about their experiences, she was having everybody go around and talk about it. My experience, something that I can remember vividly, was like the first time I went tagging.
Mhm.
And the first time I went tagging.
Oh, tagging. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And And so I wrote about like feeling the cold can, hearing the ball up and down, and like shaking the can and do all that stuff, right? And I remember like everybody was talking about I went on vacation to see my grandma. I went to do this. I went to do that. My first car, but like this was the most vivid experience that I got. And I remember we shared about it. She gave us back our papers, and my paper was like scribbled with red,
Mm,
right? Like where all the it was like a 500-word run-on sentence because I didn't know, like it's funny because I used to sit there and I used to also think to myself like, when was I supposed to learn all this?
mm,
Right, and sometimes you have an internal conversation with yourself,
yeah,
and you're your own worst critic, and I would tell myself, well, like, if you had gone to school, you probably would have learned some of it.
mm,
But what ended up happening is I read what she had wrote, and at the bottom she wrote, "You write beautifully. Come see me in my office hours." And I thought I was, like when you go see a teacher, you're in trouble. So I went to go see her, and her name is Sid Bartman, and Sid has like this infectious smile, this just loving eyes. And so when I went in, and then Sid's a hugger, she's like, "Oh, you came, right?" And so she gave me a hug, and then she told me like, "This is so great." She goes, "The way that you write, I felt like I was there. You're such a great writer." And I was like, she goes, "We just need to help you with your grammar."
mm,
And I think that's the second time that I felt something kind of push me, right? Or felt this thing of like, shit, I can be a student,
yeah,
right? And then there was a third incident with my mentor, Diana Felix. She was a counselor, and I met her, and I think it's funny because she has this quote on the back of her. She had this quote, and it says, "I'm not saying that I'm gonna change the world, but I guarantee you that I will spark the mind of the person that will change the world."
that's
That's
Tupac.
Tupac,
Yeah,
right? And I told her, "Oh, that's Tupac," and she's like, "Oh yeah, I love Tupac," and I really love Tupac. And I feel Tupac is like a paradox for all of us, right? Because he has all the love, all the activism, all the social justice, but he has all the gangster, he has all the crime, all the hurt, and it's all within him,
yeah,
right? But he always moves like if it was one.
yeah.
He could create an album that'll have everything mixed into it. And so I really looked at like the way that he moved, right? Even with all the allegations and all the stuff that he has behind him moving forward, right? To having some type of love. And so when she told me that, and I told her like, "Yeah, this is my experiences where I've been," and this lady was like the first time that she had met me, and she's like, "Listen," she goes, "You're gonna work at a community college, you're gonna write a thesis, you're gonna get a master's degree, you're gonna do this, and you're gonna transfer." And I was like, "Hold up," like, and I was like, "What the fuck's a thesis?" And she's like, "Oh, a thesis is a small book," and I was like, "I can't even write 500 words right now, you know?"
uh,
And she's like, "Don't worry about it." And I think she said the most important words that any student, or I think anybody can hear, right? In our positions was, "Don't worry about it, and I'm gonna be there with you, and I'm gonna help you."
wow.
Right? And so she would always like tell me about like this thesis and this thing, and it's funny because when I did write my thesis, when I got my master's degree, she was on my thesis committee.
Nice.
So she was like, and she always, I always give her props, and then this other counselor named Oscar Flores, right? Because other than my wife and my family, like they saw potential, right? Like they saw promise in me when all I had to give was potential, right? Nothing in me, right? Like still at the bottom educationally, that they both saw that I could do something. Because Oscar would tell me that I was going to be a leader at a community college.
They saw you before you saw you.
They saw me before, and it's funny because in the fellowship I go to, we have this reading and it says, "Just for today, I will believe in someone that wants to help me,
Mhm,
believe in someone that wants to help me in my recovery." Right. But I started thinking about my education.
mhm,
Right. And these people wanted to help us in our education. And I wasn't the first formerly incarcerated person they helped.
mhm,
I'm not going to be the last, but I was the first. I was able to reap all those benefits from them.
yeah. That's heavy, man. And, you know, you spoke a lot about the love, the support that you got. and the belief that people had in you to help you turn towards education. And so I'm thinking that that love and that support and that belief also sparks something internally. And,
Mhm.
like what were those internal things that um began to shift for you, say from the street guy, the drug guy, the gang guy to the becoming a student? Like what happened? Like you said,
You
I can be a student.
you know what's funny is that was my dissertation was on, right? It's like what are and I found this concept called transformative ruptures,
Mhm,
right? And I know in criminology they have a concept, hooks for change, I think it is. It's I know there's also like Chad Maruna has a theory, but it's funny because going through and getting education, right? I was in a feminist inquiry course, and what I learned was that through theory, through education, through research, we are able to give words to things that we didn't know we were going through.
mhm,
Now, we knew we were going through them, but we didn't know what to call them, right? And like you asked, and so for me, through my dissertation and this thing called transformative ruptures by Dolores Delgado Bernal and Enrique Alemán, right? They start talking about these conversations, these instances, these moments that you have, right, that changes the way that you see yourself,
mhm,
changes the way how you feel about yourself, right? And then with the research that I did, I found that there's a second rupture. It's called the healing rupture, right? That changes the way how you move or how you really like the first one changes how you see yourself, and the second one changes how you feel about yourself.
mhm,
Right, and the second one usually comes when you begin to understand, right, that the story is a book, and the book has different chapters, right? And you can gain, right, this motivation, right, from like, okay, I saw who I was, this is who I am, but because of that, I am able to move the way that I move. And you said like there's the street guy, the hiking guy, right? Like all that stuff is what I also focus on as well with students, is like what strengths and knowledge do we have that we bring into the space, because we're not just empty receptacles, right? Like on some for like Paulo Freire, right? Like we're not just here for you to dump into us. We're here with some knowledge that gives us this context to this experience that we're getting. And so for me, it was really like that transformative rupture was those conversations they had with me. And it was really once I graduated with my master's degree that I experienced a healing rupture to see myself, right, as a scholar. And
mhm.
that's where in my thesis where me and my friend Oscar Duran coined the term streetwise scholar,
Streetwise scholar, I like that.
right? Which is someone that has all that knowledge from the streets and uses it to thrive, right, in an unknown environment, which for us becomes the rest of society, right? In a job, in education, right? In a career. And so for us, like that was our term to like, and I think for me that was like my healing rupture to be like, I'm a streetwise scholar.
Yeah, yeah. And I like the line you have on your, I think it's your LinkedIn page that says you're about to witness the strength of street knowledge. And I think that comes from an old 80s hip hop song, but it's
Yeah,
pop. Yeah. Um, Interesting too. You mentioned Paulo Freire, Theory of the Oppressed, right?
yeah.
Yeah, heavy book, man. I love that writer. Also, man, you talked about education and how education help you change the way you thought about yourself and the way you see yourself. And it makes me think about um a lot of what you're talking about. One is very reflective of my own journey because I pursued higher education too, and I use that to help me change how I see myself, how I move. And I think about the etymology of the word education, which comes from educere, which means to bring forth that which is latent. And so I'm thinking about how that really worked out for you, and you talked about that with students too, how you try to tap into their gifts, their talents, their experience, what they're bringing to the table already, and how do we turn that inside out so that we could use it to thrive in this quote
Hmm.
um, foreign environment, so to speak. You know,
But even if you think about it, you talk about
what would
education
you
is bringing.
think? Because I know like I'm looking at your background, rising scholars. Um, what what's one thing you think, like, maybe, I don't know, say, colleges and institutions, and maybe even policymakers, maybe what do they misunderstand about justice impacted students? And in answering that, maybe you could talk a little bit about your program too, Rising Scholars.
Yeah. I think one thing people miss, I think one thing that I think, we consistently celebrate this notion of second chances. And what I've come to believe now, and I think there's two things that become clear to me, right? Is one, that some of us never got a first chance. And so this is really some people's first chance at life, some people's first chance at kind of creating something for themselves. And I think that's the miss that they have is most people, right, experience the trauma of incarceration, the trauma of the streets, because like that was what they saw readily available to them. And some people, and I think, you know, policymakers, educators, and people like that are readily here, right, to create policies that promote mass incarceration and all that stuff. But it really is about, right, how like they made the problem, how are they going to fix it? And they really don't want to. And I think because the second thing that I learned from my dissertation, and it was one of my participants, is like my research, criminology, and all that is and any student services support program, I think, is built on the foundation that there will always going to continue to be traumas that people are having, and so we'll be needed to support them, right? Similar to like the substance abuse, industry, right? Like that's built on that addiction is going to be here forever, you know. And I think with programs like Rising Scholars, Project Rebound, Underground Scholars here in California, our goal, as the Underground Scholars tagline says, is to create a prison to university pipeline, and have somewhere for everybody to attend, that, or a place for them to belong, that gives them the support that they need. Because I could tell you, right, about the counseling appointments, the supports that we have, the workshops, the field trips, but really, like, every student services program has or should have those components. What we have here is the support that we give students, and this kind of sense of belonging, right, where they come to a place where they feel loved, welcomed, and they can be themselves, right? I tell my staff all the time, like, this is the place that our students should feel they're welcome. Our students should feel they're able to be themselves, you know. Um, Sometimes we have spreads. Sometimes we have, right, like we all chill, hang out. I hear people talking about war stories and this and that. And it's like, but those are conversations that you have to relate to each other, to create connection, to create community, because we also have, right, one of the most used spaces on campus. There's usually always at least one or two students around, starting at 8 a.m. when we open to 6 p.m. when we close. And those are the things that I think programs like ours do to provide that support for students. Because and you talked about the word education is to bring out something latent, right? And I really think that when you provide people the right types of supports and the right types of belief in them, right, you're going to bring out that success that they have there, right? Because it really takes a lot for a dolphin to wake up in the morning and be broke and be high by the end of the day with some dope in their pocket. Right. It really takes a lot for the stuff that we have, right, that we see people build in prison, right? But it's that education they receive in prison that allows them to create these inventions, right, that make a better quality of life. And so for what I really like, Rising Scholars programs, Project Rebounds, and having people like us, is we're bringing out that latent, right, knowledge, right, and welcoming it here,
Mhm.
you know, so that they have what they need to be able to be successful. And some days, like Dr. Waleed, I just really believe
Yeah.
is just telling somebody, I believe in you,
Hmm.
and they're going to get straight A's.
Yeah, man.
That's it. I believe some days that's it. Some days it might be a lot more than that,
Hmm.
but sometimes it's that simple feeling that I tell somebody, "Oh, we believe in you. We see this," and then they feel it.
Hmm.
It's gonna, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you, Joe. Because I think that particularly those of us who find ourselves in prisons and jail, not all of us, but many of us are very smart, very intelligent, very creative, but for whatever reason, we didn't have the supports we needed. But when we get those supports, people that believe in us, we don't have to worry about our survival. That's when our intelligence really starts to show. And I tell people
Mhm,
all the time, the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life, and like you, I've spent a lot of time on college campuses, but the most brilliant people I've ever met have been the people in the cell block, the people in the
mhm.
y'all, and I still stand by that today, 30 years later, you know? But you also, you talked about the work that you're doing. And I think that what you're doing is I think it speaks to why lived experience is essential in leadership when working with formerly incarcerated people. We have to have people like you, people like me, people that we know from wherever leading these charges, because people without these lived experiences, I think that they're more likely to maybe offend or drop the ball somewhere, whereas those of us with lived experience are a bit more sensitive to the
Yeah.
need and the perspectives of people who are coming from the streets, just to speak broadly. But if somebody, Joe, was listening, and I'm sure somebody's going to listen, but if somebody listening is carrying, say, shame or hopelessness, or they feel stuck because of where they've been in their lives,
Mhm.
what would you say to them? What would you want them to know?
There's this line, and it's in the basic text of Narcotics Anonymous, and it's at the end of the first step, right? And the first step in Narcotics Anonymous is like kind of like what we call the admission of addiction that leads to recovery,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the foundation, but it's really like I call them problem solving steps, right? The first step really tells us about there's a problem in our life, right? We just have to admit what that problem is and stop trying to control it, stop trying to hold on to it, right? And that's really what survival is trying to control something so that you have the most favorable outcome for yourself,
Mm,
right? And the last line in that step in the chapter says it doesn't matter where you've been, but where you are going,
mm,
right? And I felt once I got clean that line was so deep because many people in our space, many people hold on to the trauma, right? And we have to heal from the trauma, but allow the trauma to dictate, right, where they're going,
mhm,
to dictate what's happening, right? And it's really, the most important thing is being able to see something because I held on to it because I came to school and my mom told me to go to school and I told her for what? I don't like it. And the second thing I told her is I'm not going to get a good job anyways.
mm,
Right. And now here I am a director at a community college, right, which is a great job here in California with the promise of upward mobility to a dean's position, an associate dean's position, and like maybe and beyond.
yeah,
And so I think that's something I would tell people is that, that it doesn't matter where you've been, but where you're going. And I think the other thing we do with your podcast, right, is we can't give people things, right? The only thing that we can give people is hope.
mm, talk about it.
And and hopefully that hope that you get from listening to somebody on your podcast
Mhm,
gives you something for yourself, right? That can lead to like what is that promise, right? Because there's the promise that we have inside of us that we get to fulfill, right? As in, here's your promise, your gift. But there's also this promise of like, if you move forward and you try and you continue to push forward, something's going to change,
mhm,
right? And sometimes it may not be, right, abounding success, but it may be success for you in a change of your life of what you do with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But some people get caught up in like money, cars, clothes, possessions,
Most of us.
but success might be peace,
Yeah.
right? And it becomes that kind of stuff. Like, as a director, people are like, "Oh, you got power." I don't have power, Dr. Waleed. I have responsibility,
Yeah. Talk about that, Joe. Yeah.
right? Like the more educated I am, or people even say like, "Oh, but everybody loves you and everybody looks up to you and everybody, you're influential." Like that influence brings not power but responsibility,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm highly visible, people know who I am, right? And so it gives me the responsibility of I have to behave right, right? Because like
It's another protective factor.
mhm. Because like imagine, right? You wouldn't have me on here if you heard that I was some kind of crash out, right?
Right.
That I'll be cussing people out, wilding out, and all that stuff. So like, there's this responsibility that I have that some people have that when you're highly visible and you get this people talking to you and people want to talk to you and people want to have all this, they people forget, right? And so when people crash out and do all this stuff and then they look back, they don't understand. They don't only look bad; they make us look bad as well.
Mhm. That's right.
Right, and that's the responsibility that I think a lot of people right now that have done some of those things in this movement forgot that when they look bad, we all look bad.
That's right. They stepped us all back. And I like what you said, Joe. You said it's not power that I have, but it's responsibility. you know and if for nothing else, I think that that speaks to maturity, that speaks to growth, and I think that that's something that all of us, coming walking this road, coming out of the penitentiary, living here in the communities, in recovery, I think that that's what we need to remember. We are responsible, we have responsibility, we have responsibility to influence people who are coming behind us, people who are watching us, waiting for our downfall, as well as people who are not sure. And so we have a message to send out just by how we conduct ourselves, I think,
Mhm.
or that life is possible and you can do a lot better than what you've done in the past. And so, brother, we're coming up in the last couple minutes or so. I want to ask you one more thing, and then I'm going to give you some time to riff. And that is, if you could maybe think back to when you were a younger dude, man, what do you think younger Joe would think if he could see Dr. Joe Louis Hernandez today?
Um, I think I wouldn't believe it, right? And I'll give you a story. So when I was in high school, at Wilson High School in Sereno,
Uh-huh.
my homies told me, "Let's join this program. They feed us," and it was really a gang prevention program,
Uh-huh.
right? And then they feed us and they take us places, and so they took us to Cal State LA, right? And that's why I say like it's crazy, right? Because they took us to Cal State LA, they gave us a tour, we met with people, right? And they give you all this hope, all and as a youngster, you're like, you're just hearing all this whoop whoop,
Right, right, right.
And I remember thinking to myself, like, I ain't coming here, I'm gonna go to prison, right? Like this isn't where I'm coming, and for me, and then I dropped out of school. And then I took the bus to a dropout school, right, which was like a home studies, and the bus I would take, the city bus, would go by Cal State LA every day.
Mhm.
So every day that I was going to school, I'd go by Cal State LA, and still couldn't I not think that I would be, getting education. And I say this right because my bachelor's degree I received from Cal State LA. Right, when I got admitted, it was something crazy, and so to tell you, if young Joe could see where this Joe is at, maybe he might think he's a lame, maybe he's a sellout, right? Because it's not something that I could imagine at that age,
Yeah.
and it's funny because the next story that I always remember is I remember telling my dad that I wanted to be a doctor, and my dad telling me like, "Well, for we have a business, right? Should be a businessman," and um I'm a doctor, not
Yeah.
that kind of doctor, but I got a doctorate, right? So I'm a
Yeah.
doctor, you
You're a
know,
doc.
and those two things come true that like maybe young Joe knew, little Joe knew what I would accomplish, and young Joe couldn't understand what I would accomplish, right? Because it, like, again, right, it wasn't something that was in front of me anymore, right? That dream was crushed.
Yeah,
Be a doctor, but because a new dream had replaced it, right? And most people from the hood are fed this lie, right? That this is our life.
yeah,
So I think young Joe would like trip out that I am where I am, and it's funny because, I've never been to prison, but I've visited prison twice now
yeah,
and got to leave on the same day, you know,
yeah,
but and I think that's the craziest thing that like young Joe, right, that little former tagger, that little tag banger, right, like he couldn't imagine the things that I'm doing today.
yeah, yeah. It's wonderful what you're doing today, man, and all the lives that you're touching today and the example that you're being for everyone who gets to know you, read your story, and sit under the sound of your voice. And so for that, Joe, with like 3 minutes left, is there anything that I didn't touch on that you'd like to maybe shout out?
I think I just want to shout out all those that are trying, and I think that's the basis of everything that we do is try. Try to make something better with yourself and learn the responsibility that it is when you're in a leadership position, right? Or when you're highly visible or when you do things, right? Because at the end of the day, I think the thing that we've all moved away and we learned it when we were in the hood, right? We had a community when we were in the hood.
Yeah,
And we would look out for our homies, but all of a sudden we get here and then the only person people want to look out for is themselves, make themselves look good, be good themselves, make themselves money. You know, I was told early on, right, that it was me plus 10. Wherever I went, I had to bring 10 people,
mm,
right? And uplift 10 people. And and so I charge everybody that listens to this, everybody that comes into this movement, everybody that gets popularity, everybody that goes viral, that it's you plus 10.
yeah, I like
Don't the success, like I think the success is cool, but maybe we should start measuring that success with like how many people have you helped? I think Kendrick Lamar has in one of his songs, he has that line that says, "How many souls have you touched today?"
yeah,
Right? How many people have you given hope? How many people have you supported? How many people, right? Have you even just cracked a smile at that? Maybe they it gave them, because we all know about walking around me mugging,
yeah,
and dogging everybody, but like, shit changes and people, you know, I think in life we give hope to others. I was just at my brother Kevin's graduation hooding on Sunday, man, and he has a story and he's been through some shit, even in and out of education and in and out of recovery, and he just earned his master's degree and got hooded, and then a success story that we have within Rising Scholars has been Carlos Lopez, who was a student here with us, did 18 years, came to us right after the pandemic, and so I went to his bachelor's graduation yesterday, and now in the fall he's getting ready to start, his master's program, and I'm really joyous because he's in the same master's program that I did,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that I joined it and I applied to because my mentor did it.
Yo, that is wonderful the way that you've touched lives like that, man. I wanna say thank you for your time, Joe. This has just been powerful. I wish you could really see me. I'm almost in tears listening to your story.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I wish you a great day, brother.
You too. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, man. Peace.
All right. Peace.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for hanging out with me for another episode of the Prison to Promise podcast. If you or someone you know would like to share their Prison to Promise story on this platform, please hit me up at drcraigwaleed@gmail.com. I'll spell it for you. That's DrCraigWaleed gmail.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.